Thanks for coming to the office hours. Today's agenda is mostly to go over the Python 2 to 3 upgrade, as Kyle's been digging into that quite a bit. And at the end of, and then Brandon has added a new iterative scheduler that we can go over. And then if there's any other topics people want to cover, we can do that at the end. And yeah, so with that, I will turn it over to Kyle.
Yeah. So about a little over a week ago, I broke free from some of my other obligations and was able to focus on the port from 2 to 3. And so this is I want to discuss two things. One is the overall progress of that port, and some of the things that I've discovered in regards to the amount of effort required in order to port an agent from 2 to 3. So as of this moment, the platform itself can run in 3, and I can verify that the following functionality works correctly. Most of the subsystems, all of the subsystems necessary for agent to start up and authorize with the platform work correctly. RPC calls work correctly. PubSub works correctly. And therefore, the listener agent runs correctly. The config store works correctly. And let's see, auth. And there's probably some other stuff that I'm forgetting. And the reason I was kind of antsy about having a release that I've been, when we've discussed this, that I've been antsy about having a longer term release candidate is because there's lots of little hairs that need to be addressed in the platform itself. Now, fortunately, the amount of work necessary to get an agent working is not too bad. Now, I picked the hairiest, scariest agent I could find, which was the master driver, and ported it to 3 and tested it, and it helped me expose a few problems in the core platform in the process. But the good news is, other than some stuff that I am doing that is specific to the master driver agent, which doesn't port cleanly to 3 using the Python 2 to 3 script, as far as I can tell, everything else updates with the 2 to 3 script. Well, and there is one thing that's common to all agents that 2 to 3 does not catch, and we'll discuss that. So, so I have here the commit for the updating the master driver to 3, and I will point out stuff that 2 to 3 was not able to catch, that didn't catch automatically, and I'll point out some of the things that 2 to 3 does that you may want to undo because technically it will be incorrect. But that only happens if you use certain functions that used certain functions in 3 or in 2 when you should have been using a different function, in which case 2 to 3 does the right thing. So the first thing it does is it fixes all my, 2 to 3 has fixed all my imports correctly. These style of absolute imports don't work correctly in 3 anymore because it's ambiguous. So you have to specify them as relative imports in order to get them to work correctly. 2 to 3 catches that. Everywhere I've used iter values, it gets turned into values, which is the equivalent in 3. It catches standard exception and changes it to exception. If I had accidentally used the old style of specifying an exception using a comma, it catches that and fixes it as well. Iter keys gets turned to keys. Now, one thing that it will do, and in fact, let's see, devices topic actual. So this right here is actually the equivalent. But like in the original version, I went back and changed what 2 to 3 did. So in 2 to 3, it took this line right here and it encapsulated it in a call to list. Because in 2, the keys, the keys call on a dictionary returned a list. And so to ensure the same behavior, 2 to 3 will just wrap that in a list call. And you'll find that if you used keys when you should have used iter keys, it will wrap it up in a list call, and you'll go over the changes that it made, and you'll say, wait, it shouldn't have done that. I can actually just use the keys call, and so you have to go through and clean those up. And so in a lot of cases, these won't show up as changes because I went back and fixed them before I committed them. But you'll see that 2 to 3 wants to wrap these things in list calls even when it's not appropriate because it doesn't know. There's too many edge cases where it could not put it in a list call where it should have, and so they just do it in a just blanket to ensure the equivalent behavior, because that's really what they're looking for, is equivalent behavior, not necessarily best behavior. And so you'll see that if you run 2 to 3. Let's see, fix my imports. View keys is now is now replaced with keys, which is appropriate. Iter items, standard area is replaced with exception. You no longer have to inherit from object, but it leaves it in. The nice thing is it fixed my abstract base class it moves the, it redoes that, this virtual class and fixes it up so that it will work properly in 3. This is a change that is actually correct, where it says, okay, I was taking advantage of the fact that the keys returns a list because I want this function to return a list, and 2 to 3 caught that and said, well, okay, in order to get the equivalent behavior, we have to wrap this in a list call. And in this case, it's appropriate. But if this call was like an argument to a for loop, then wrapping it with a list wouldn't be appropriate. And so you have to go through and remove those. Same thing, fixing up my virtual class, iter items. Oh, here's an example.
Hi, Maureen. It's Terry Hurt with Intellimation.
Yeah.
On there a couple days ago on the analytics piece. I wanted to chat with you a little bit to understand, Southland Energy, Energy Services versus NBI. So if we get a chance, 484-535-2153.
Oh.
Thanks, buddy.
Hey, Terry.
Sorry, I muted. I'll mute the audience.
Okay.
And then unmute you. Hold on a second, Kyle.
Okay.
Okay, Kyle, go for it.
Yeah, I think Terry just dropped off too.
Ah.
No, oh no, he's down at the bottom of the list. Okay. Okay, so it fixes the exception. So this is the old style, and this is ambiguous, or it's hard to understand. This format is not allowed in Python 3 anymore, and 2 to 3 catches that. It fixes my string IO imports. Let's see, replaces xrange calls with range. If you just have a naked range call, it will wrap it up in a list, so you'll get the equivalent behavior. Let's see, and yeah, everything else, and that's the kind of stuff that it fixes. And I went through. Long no longer exists in Python 3, so this is actually nice. In some cases it will replace this with int. But I think in this case it actually figured out. No, in this case it replaced it with int because it's a tuple. But if it's a tuple that's an argument to is instance, it says, oh, int's already in your list of arguments, so I can just remove long because int's equivalent. It is smart. It is actually smart enough to do that. Let's see. The subprocess library goes away in Python 3 because it's essentially built in now. Yeah. So these are all the kinds of things that it will fix. Oh, I need to actually undo this. So it will fix print statements, but actually no, this is technically correct. In this case, we're printing a tuple, and it says, okay, well, we need to put that tuple in parentheses. So it does the right thing there. Let's see. Yeah, same. Fix up my print statements. Let's see, that's me removing unneeded imports, more fixes to print, and on and on and on. Okay, so those are the things that 2 to 3 caught, with a couple of exceptions. It fixed my URL lib imports automatically, So with a few exceptions, all of this stuff was handled by 2 to 3. Now this thing right here was not handled by 2 to 3, and this is going to affect just about every agent out there. So in our pre-packaged setup.py script, the -1 argument is no longer valid for this import call, and you have to replace it with a 0. So since this affects every agent out there, this has led us to consider writing a script. It's like Voltron package 2 to 3 or something like that, where you can pass it an agent source code directory, and it will run 2 to 3 on it, but then it will also catch this right here, because this affects every agent out there. And it's, like I say, it's a simple fix, and then it just works. So now if we want to look at the changes that were specific to the master driver that 2 to 3 did not catch. So this is actually something that only the master driver does. We've moved the JSON API call out of agent. Brandon did this because in one of his pull requests, and it makes more sense. This just also happened to affect the master driver, and we didn't catch it. So, the master driver also imports modules dynamically using the _import call. So I had to fix that. And then because we can't do this relative import anymore, we have to fully qualify it or add a dot in front of the interfaces. That would have worked as well. That change, we have to do a little bit more work to get the resulting interface class out of the module. And then this OBX thing was something that got missed. Well, I did a merge, and then OBX appeared in my merge, and so I had to fix that as well. So this is the kind of edge stuff that we have to fix, specifically in 2 to 3. The only other thing that I could potentially think of where you might run into 2 to 3 problems that 2 to 3 won't fix is if you're using the requests library, and requests is returning bytes when you are expecting to deal with a string object. Other than that, the interface that the platform presents doesn't really require any changes to your code. Because we expect Python objects and strings, and then we deal with the conversion to and from bytes under the hood, so that you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Let's see, and everything else. So yeah, I posted my a link to my branch, my Python 3 branch, specifically to the list of commits, so you can see. So you can follow that effort if you're interested in it. You're not going to see any commits Monday and Tuesday because I have 2 all-day meetings that day, so I'm not going to be working on this. But I will be resuming work on Wednesday of next week. So yeah, I believe the next step in the process is to start running the tests. Actually, I need to go through all of the service agents and make sure that they work on do the 2 to 3 conversion, and then I'm going to start running the tests and try and suss out all of the problems that I can find. So, are there any questions?
Hey, Kyle.
Yeah.
What about our protocol support, like Modbus and BACnet? Are those libraries compatible with 3.0?
Okay, so that's a good question. So BACnet has a fully supported version, Python 3 version. He actually maintains 2 or 3 different versions of BACpipes. One for 2.7, one for I can't remember if he still supports 2.6, but then there's at least one version that he supports for 3, and so I had no problem importing that. I haven't actually used it yet. Modbus, we just switched over to PyModbus 3 because plain old PyMod bus doesn't doesn't work in, well, maybe I ought to try upgrading to the latest version, but I think plain old PyModBus and PyModBus 3 are maintained by the same person, but they're different projects. So I switched it over to PyModBus 3. Supposedly it has the same interface. We just need to test it.
What about Modbus TK?
Modbus TK, my understanding was Modbus TK supports 2 and 3.
Okay.
Okay, so that's good. How about some of our other heavily used libraries like Pandas and?
Pandas and NumPy both completely support 3.
Okay, that's good. Those are
Yeah.
the two that we heavily use. Okay.
Yeah, those have been fully supported 3 for a long time. The 2 or 3 things that held us up from using 3 in the first place, and Brandon can probably comment on this as well. The big ones were, let's see, PyModBus didn't have a 3 version, and Modbus was a very important protocol when we started Voltron. Backpipes, I don't think had a 3 version, and I don't think gEvent supported 3 either. And the async library wasn't a thing yet in 3 at the time the Voltron project started, and so those things all combined together to make to where we had to start with Voltron. So now all of those libraries are available in 3, and now we're actually running into a situation where libraries people want to use are only supported in 3, and so the switch is.
Okay, so my second to last question.
Second to last.
Well, I have a comment and a question.
Sure.
So, if we migrate to 3.0, can we, as we are migrating, can we have combinations of both?
Combinations of both.
You mean the old 2.7 or whatever versus and 3.0?
You could do it with different. You could certainly do it with different installs of Voltron. Like you could have a Voltron 2 instance talking to a Voltron 3 or Voltron. Yeah. Now, as far as like running a Voltron 2 agent in 3 and vice versa.
No.
Okay. No. That's
so
yeah. Good. I'm glad that's not what you're asking for.
No, my last comment was Craig was going to set up or create an instance with Robert's help to test MQTT on, or not MQTT, the
RabbitMQ, yeah.
Yeah, RabbitMQ on a building on our campus. And I don't know if he started that or not. Maybe if he didn't start, then that would be the place where you want to, start with 3.0.
I'm not sure if that's the best idea, because then we've got 2 major changes to the platform that we would be testing at the same time. We probably want to do just RabbitMQ and make sure that that's working. And then once we're confident that the RabbitMQ stuff is ready for prime time, go ahead and release it, and then we'll do the same thing with 3 later on.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. All right. The underlying protocol doesn't change. Everything is still ultimately, when stuff goes into the 0MQ library, it's in bytes. The one rule that I have established for byte to string conversions is, unless there is a specific reason to do otherwise, and there is one place where there's a specific reason to do otherwise, everything that's encoded is encoded into UTF-8, and everything is decoded from UTF-8.
One other thing as well, it's not Python 3.0, it's Python 3.6.
Yeah, okay, that's
targeting.
Yeah, it's Python 3.
It actually makes a difference, apparently.
Yeah.
There's some stuff in 3.6 that gives us niceties. So
yeah, we're
going to go to the freaking almost the bleeding edge, rather than the.
And by the time it comes out, it won't be bleeding edge anymore.
That's right. We'll have 3.8 and 9.
So Craig brings up a good point. We are targeting Python 3.6. I am specifically using things in the core platform that are only available in 3.6 in lots of different places. so that 3.6 becomes effectively enforced as the minimum version for Voltron with Python 3 support. And the biggest thing is we like format strings, but there are a few other things that came along in 3.6 that are nice that we don't want to deny users because we elected to target 5 instead of 6. 3.7 is the most recent version of Python. 3.6 is available in the latest version of Ubuntu LTS and Mint, 18, and Mint LTS, which it's Mint 19. Mint 18 still has 3.5 installed by default. So we figure if you're gonna, the upgrade to Voltron with Python 3 support is going to be a big deal. You're going to have to rebuild your agents, and so insisting that people at this point like upgrade their operating system in order to use that version of Python, it's like you've got to upgrade you've got to upgrade all of your stuff anyway. So that's the thinking. And if you want to use Python 2.7, well, there will always be Voltron version 6, which we will probably support for longer than we have older Python or older Voltron versions, just for that reason. Let's see. I think that's everything I got. Are there any other questions or comments? No? Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Cool. Thanks, Kyle.
And we've asked Brandon to talk about a new feature that we recently pulled in. So Brandon, if you want to share your screen, we can, and show us some examples maybe, and that'd be great.
Yeah, let me find the right window to share.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
So it was recently asked on the Voltron community on Slack whether we had like a cron decorator where someone could pass in a cron schedule string and just have it execute that schedule. And it reminded me of a module I wrote when I was back at PNNL that kind of went off into obscurity. I don't think anybody really knew it was there except for me. Anyways, so I pointed him to that, but in the process, it also pointed out kind of a pain point of scheduling, which is in order to use that cron schedule, you couldn't just use it in a decorator. You had to write your callback in such a way that it had to schedule the next event each time. And that's actually, if you're looking at the window now, kind of what it's showing. So this continuous method here uses that form where in your on start, you schedule it, or instead of scheduling it, I'm just calling it for the first time. And
then you have to reschedule it every time.
Yeah, so every time it hits at the beginning of the method, it restarts it. But I'm also running, starting a periodic up here to demonstrate a problem with the periodic decorator. And you'll see that I have a sleep in here where it'll sleep for 5 seconds, but the periodic is supposed to execute every second. So the output there is in black. You can see that the periodic, instead of executing every second, it's really more like every 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because it doesn't actually, it's actually running in a G event where it'll execute the function and then it'll sleep the number of seconds you've given it. So, and if your function doesn't execute quickly, it's going to cause drift.
It's going to drift anyway. It's just at a lower degree, but yeah, it still drifts.
Yeah. So that's one of the problems with periodic, and you'll see this continuous function. You're using that, it works, but there's a better way. And so this whole thing kind of just brought up, well, why couldn't we just pass like an iterator to the schedule decorator and have it just follow that schedule? And that's what I whipped out real quick, just because I thought it was an easy fix, and it was. So let me switch.
Yeah, the other use case for that, the pattern that that his continuous method follows was if you wanted to say have your periodic function like execute right on the top of the hour, at the hour on the top of the hour, you would have to use the method that his continuous method would use, and then you'd have to carefully schedule your first run and then do delta times off of it. Yeah, it's
okay.
a pain.
So this this next version of my periodic agent demonstrates periodic scheduling with deterministic behavior. So you'll see now we're calling the schedule decorator with this new, with this new periodic generator, and that's now found in the scheduling module. And so it's really pretty simple. It just takes the period, an optional start and stop times, and then it's just going to infinitely yield through here, unless you give it a stop time that it'll stop on that. But I'll demonstrate that in a second. So now we have this new periodic, and you'll see it execute every 3 seconds, every 3 seconds, regardless of the fact that it's still doing this sleep in there for 5 seconds. So it is executing deterministically. All right. So let's move on to the next one.
Okay.
All right. So in here, this just demonstrates the start and stop parameters. So yeah, the periodic decorator had a wait parameter, which allowed you to basically put off the first execution for so many seconds. And you can still do that now by passing in a time delta for the start, or you can pass in an absolute date time object. If it's none, it'll just use now. And then you can also pass in a stop. So instead of executing infinitely, once it hits that stop time, it'll stop, which you can see right now, it's no longer printing anything after the 10 seconds.
This is going to be so nice for cleaning up the master driver agent.
All right, next thing I wanted to demonstrate was the cron scheduler.
Because that directly addresses a problem that I had to solve in the master driver agent.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll make scheduling easier for many cases.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Okay, so there, like I said, there was this cron module, which has now been deprecated. It's still there, and it still does the same thing that the old cron module did, but it was moved into this scheduling module. So along with this periodic decorator, or sorry, periodic generator, there's this cron generator. And maybe I should just say well, I'm going to start this because it can sometimes take a minute. But what the new schedule method expects, you can still give it an absolute time for just a one-shot event. Or, in fact, you can see that's what we're doing here on line 32, is scheduling a one-shot event that's going to cancel the periodic that was scheduled just before it. So it should only execute, 3 times, and that's what happened. As far as the schedule method, it like I said, expects an absolute time or an iterable of date time objects that really should be in increasing order. There's nothing enforcing this increasing order. You'll just get executions that occur immediately if it's before the current time. So cron, if you're familiar with cron, it takes 5 strings separated, or 5 items separated by space. This particular cron specification basically just says execute every minute. And as this schedule down here shows, that's going to happen, let's see, exactly on the second, or exactly on the minute, as soon as it ticks over. So if you want to offset that so many seconds, you can pass in this second argument, and then it will execute exactly on that second. Because by default, it has minute resolution.
A cron does?
Yeah, cron only goes down to the minute.
Okay.
So,
If I do the second resolution, can I give that a fractional second value?
it can be a float, so yeah.
Okay.
All right. And on to the next. So what I also wanted to demonstrate is that this doesn't have to be a generator. So for instance, in this onStart method here, we're creating a schedule that is a list, and then just passing in that list to the schedule. And so you can see right here where it's executed the list, and as soon as as soon as it's gone past the last element, it'll just stop. And you can write your own generators, such as the uniform function up here. It is going to execute every 1 to 3 seconds with a uniform distribution. So, I mean, really that's all I wanted to show, is that now schedule has new powers. So,
Behold.
and it was a real easy
Use
fix.
them only for good.
That's
Yes.
right.
Now you've got me thinking about ways we could use this for evil. I can't think of anything, which is probably good. So
We'll add that to the threat profile for the security assessment, right?
There you go.
evil uses of this schedule.
Evil schedule. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, cool. Thanks, Brandon.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah, and along with that security assessment, I think I will have the team here at PNNL that put together that assessment. I might see if they're available on the next office hours, and we can kind of go through that with folks. The other note I wanted to make was I attended the Eclipse IoT working group earlier this week and presented Voltron there, and trying to figure out what eclipsizing Voltron means practically, and then what our connections to the other projects might be. I'm going to try and pull some more content about that together, and see if maybe we can get the IoT working group leader to present at a Voltron office hours too. All but one of the projects in that working group are Java based. So that's a potential issue, but we'll see if there's anything.
It's okay.
There.
We've got with 6, we have a way to deal with Java. Talking to our platform.
Java is a 4-letter word.
Yes, it is a 4-letter
really
word.
is.
Unfortunately, it's good. Sometimes it wakes me up in the morning. So.
Yeah.
Aha.
A lot of OSGI based stuff there, but there is also some AMQP messaging we're doing. So okay, there's some potential there.
So we have a question from Yemen. Let's see. Python 3 does not differentiate 3.x. Yeah, it's that's just what I called my branch. Craig mentions Python 3.6. So it's 3.6 or later. So 3.5 will not be supported, but 3.6 and 3.7 will. Generally, Python is backwards compatible. So if you target a particular version, every version after that should work, unless you were doing something really out on the fringes, and then occasionally things will get broken. But that's very uncommon. So yeah, So 3.6 and 3.7 and you know, well, 3.8's probably going to get delayed for reasons, but yeah, those two versions should work just fine.
Okay.
All right.
Anything else? All right. If not, we will call that a meeting.
Awesome.
All right, cool. Thanks for everybody for calling in, and let us know if there's any topics that you'd like to see covered, or if you have research that you'd like to present, and we will work that into the agenda for the next call.
All right.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Talk to you later.